If you begin to look for art-based content on this platform, you're going to stumble pretty quickly into a couple of specific arenas. The first is probably just time lapses, watching other people work on really cool things and getting to see those play out. The second, rather obviously, is probably instructional material. How to draw trees, how to draw a dragon, how to plan your art career. But the third, and perhaps the one that I'm most concerned with, is rather intriguing. And this entire corner of art YouTube has to do with the fact that art is difficult. And how do we deal with that? So many of these are how to avoid procrastination, how to plan your art career and actually stick to it, how to find motivation or inspiration, how to conjure ideas. So many things that really, if you sink your teeth into them, are dealing with the fact that art is difficult, perhaps by its very nature. And that's what I want to delve into today. Does art have to be hard? Do we sometimes accidentally make it harder on ourselves than it needs to be? Or is this just part of its nature? Well, my name is Zach, and welcome to episode 93 of the podcast. Obviously, today we're going to be talking about art and whether it has to be hard, and if it does, or doesn't, I suppose, what do we do with that? How do we deal with it? As usual, I'm going to explore what I mean by the topic, and then I'm going to go over how this might affect you as the artist. I'll wrap up at the end with some of my own thoughts, so please stay tuned for that. And as we get started, I would love to hear your opinion. Has art been difficult for you at any point in the journey? And if it has, I'd love to hear what the first point of difficulty is. For so many people, myself included, it wasn't difficult for a long time. It was only something that was fun. And then I had this kind of terrible magical place that I hit where all of a sudden it became really insurmountable. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, I'd love to hear about that in the comments below, and it would be of benefit to other people too. So, does art have to be hard? Well, yes and no, and let's unpack that before it gets frustrating, shall we? On one side, of course it doesn't need to be frustrating. It is what you make of it in most cases, and you can decide at some level not to be frustrated by it. However, most of us lack the ability to simply make that choice and then hold to it like a trench in mid-20th century warfare. If you choose to only engage with it in a simple manner, a manner laid out before you, or for joy alone, then no, I don't think it has to be hard. If that is the path that you take, either by design or by happy chance, you likely do not have to struggle with the difficult parts of art. What is the yes then? Well, there are a lot of reasons for this. Perhaps first off is the fact that art almost never exists in a vacuum. People around you will comment on your work, see your work, sigh, sneer, or simply ignore your work. You, as a human creature, are likely to find it difficult to ignore every one of those actions, even though that is likely the wisest and best course of action. You might find yourself comparing your artwork to that of another. You might be thrown into the ring unwillingly, and more than likely, you will find yourself desiring a skill or a piece of knowledge that you do not yet have. Art is hard, and though it does not have to be, perhaps, it most likely will be, and most likely has been for you up until this point as well. I have run into several people over the course of my artistic life where their outlook has been surprising and different than most. And I wish that their outlook was the more common approach, frankly. I think that working on art for yourself, for the joy of creating, for just the basic human understanding and knowledge that we are beings that need to produce things. Not all of us have this desire, but those of us that do, it's a really important and integral component of our humanity. And if we were all, as artists, able to find solace in that fact and just create for ourselves, I think that's probably the best path. I've talked about this before on the channel, that if you are the person who can work on art for just yourself and for the joy of making it, that's probably the ideal. In the same way that I would say that poetry is probably the height of literature. It is the most pure form and has a chance at least to be the highest form of literature. That's probably a conversation for another time, but having worked at a classical school for over a decade and worked with a lot of people who are much, much smarter than me, I kind of personally came to the conclusion that poetry is probably the purest form of written human expression, and therefore the most difficult and perhaps the most difficult to understand. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Poetry is hard, and it's just such a pure, beautiful thing. But if you're able to approach art that way, I think that is the best approach. And the whole reason that I'm having this conversation and I wanted to talk about this is kind of my mind wrapping around the fact that so much of what we talk about as artists, so much of what I taught about at the high levels when I was teaching high school students, and a lot of the conversations that we have on the Discord server and whatnot really are tied into more mental, psychological, and emotional issues. It's often not just like, how do I learn how to draw a thing or mix this color of green specifically, or what school should I go to? Those things are important, obviously, but they're more important in application, whereas all these other issues are wrapping around just the fact that the human mind, though it really wants to be creative and create things and bring them to fruition, seems to struggle with it because there's just so much that can grab onto other things. It's almost like when you try to creativity is like a pine cone. It has so many jagged edges on it that by itself it is interesting and beautiful and can be observed, but when you handle it, it gets stuck to things. It gets stuck to any cloth it runs into. It's probably got some sap on it, so it's going to get sticky and whatnot. It's just difficult to handle. It has lots of edges that, get caught on things. And I don't mean this in a negative way so much as it's just creativity has a lot of tendrils and it has a lot of places that it accidentally sinks itself into. And so when you try to work on creative things, like, you need your emotions to be in a good spot, or at least a productive spot. You need to physically be in a spot where you have the energy to do what you're doing. You need to be in a mentally stable spot where you can think through and problem solve. And then you also have to deal with all of the issues that come up with when your sketches don't turn out quite right, or when somebody comes into your space and screws up your train of thought and you have to recalibrate. Like, there's so many other little side issues that come in with art. And so the whole point of this podcast is just simply the fact that as I was chewing on all of that, I realized all of these things just make art hard. And again, I don't think it has to be, but I think it will be for most of us. It's certainly been my experience that art is difficult, even though it probably doesn't need to be. So with all that said, and those caveats and all those pieces, like, what do we do about it? If art is hard, perhaps has to be this difficult, what can we do about that issue? Do we simply brace for it, pull up our pants and strap on our boots and move forward? In short, that's not a bad option. I mean, honestly, but it is not the only one available to us. So I guess it comes down to this. Art doesn't have to be hard, but for most of us, it certainly will be. And so let's take a look at a couple of strategies to either make that situation more bearable or less difficult. And let's start with that, with making it less difficult. The first thing that I want to touch on here is be honest with yourself. This is simply going to unlock some of the components that are weighing you down and making it more difficult than it needs to be. If you're not honest, for example, about your current level of art ability, it's going to make things more difficult. There's nothing wrong with being an amateur. There's nothing wrong with being a beginner. If you are somebody who has just started oil painting, your expectations should not be that your skills are going to be at the same level they are in one of your other artistic ventures. This is something I run into frequently. I get so excited about starting a new medium, and then immediately, almost across the board, am disappointed because when I take on a new tool for the first time, I expect to be at the same level of proficiency that I have been. And of course, I'm not. It's a new tool. It often doesn't matter what that new tool is. You could be a very proficient pianist, and if all of a sudden somebody gives you a harpsichord, yes, a lot of that translates, but it's not exactly the same. You're not going to be at the same skill level. Now, the sad reality here is generally, if you stick to it, you don't have to stick to it for that long, and you will improve tremendously. But you do have to stick to it. You do have to be involved for a while. You do have to keep your mind on the right things in order to keep moving forward. So be honest with yourself about the current level of skill that you possess, but also be honest about what you can accomplish. This isn't just finishing a product, but it's also how long a product might take for you to finish. When you are beginning something, or even if you've been at it for a while, but you just know that you're a slower artist, it's important to be aware of that and to acknowledge it, and probably not to hold yourself necessarily in contempt. Like, don't be upset with yourself about it, but just have a realistic perspective concerning that particular thing. Have an understanding and an honesty about that. But there are other areas in your life that you can be honest with yourself when it comes to your artwork. If you think about the things that are frustrating, if you know that you have a tendency to procrastinate, you need to be honest with yourself and realize that you're probably going to procrastinate some of your artwork and that it's going to create some headaches. Now, there's a lot to be said for working through those negative, if you want to call them that way, traits that you would like to, either get rid of or that inhibit you in some way. But that is kind of coming at things from a different angle. I think especially right now for what I'm talking about here is just be honest with yourself about your current capacity, what you're capable of doing. Be honest with yourself about your traits. If you are somebody who lacks motivation or inspiration or tends to procrastinate, if you don't have a lot of time in your life because you have young children running around or you've got a really demanding job, it's not reasonable if you have a crazy stressful job to assume that you're going to jump into crazy stressful art every day when you come home from work. Don't set yourself up for that kind of failure. Put yourself in a situation where the art that you're doing when you get home from work is relaxing. It is helping relieve the stress from that workday. Be honest with yourself, and that will help to lessen some of the burden, some of the difficulty that comes along with this journey. Next on this list is to give yourself an adequate amount of time to improve and also to accomplish the desired tasks that you have before you. This is not quite the same as being honest with yourself, because that has to do with where you are in the moment. But the other side of that is to make sure that you're actually allowing yourself enough time to do what you want to do. A lot of the tasks that you're trying to accomplish as an artist are going to take a tremendous amount of time. Even if you want to fill a sketchbook simply with gesture drawings, stuff that happens in 1 to 5 minutes and you can fit a couple on a page, a normal 50-page or 70-page sketchbook is still going to take a considerable amount of time. If you're trying to do drawings like you're watching on this channel or take place in the background here, it's going to take a lot longer. Art takes a lot of time in almost all cases, so make sure you allow yourself adequate enough time to actually accomplish what you want to. This is doubly true if what you want to do is to improve, to gain new skills, to increase the skills that you have, because that takes a tremendous amount of time. And it's also fairly difficult to gauge. It might be easier to gauge where your skill level is at a particular moment, but to gauge how long it's going to take you to get from one point to another is incredibly difficult. This is partly the case because there are so many aspects to art. When you are working on the very simplest stages of learning an artistic skill, there are only a couple things to focus on. But if, again, you look at this piece that is developing in the background of this podcast, the sketching had to go into this, which involved the concept stages, me thinking about what I wanted to accomplish, trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. The next stage of that is actually putting down a finished sketch. Then you've got the inking, which is what you're watching right now. That will eventually fade into texturing. But before any of that happens, you've got perspective, you've got anatomy of the creatures and then the character that I'm going to put in, and you certainly have composition and placement. All of these are individual skills that need to be developed, and that's part of the reason why it is so difficult to gauge how long it's going to take to get better, to improve, or to get to a place that you want to be artistically. There are so many individual aspects. So the first thing here is just to make sure that you give yourself an adequate amount of time to improve, an adequate amount of time to accomplish the things that you want to. And if you're not sure how much time it's going to take, then I would just try to come up with an assumption and then maybe double it or quadruple it for the first couple times until you understand a little better how long those things take. For me, most of the drawings like this that I do, I generally figure they're going to take about 3 to 4 hours. Sometimes they take way less, and sometimes they take a little bit more. Very seldom do drawings this size take me a tremendous amount of time, but it's not unheard of for one of these pieces to take 5 to 7 hours. But the only reason I know that, the only reason I can be honest with myself and give myself adequate time, is because I've done it, I've been gracious with myself, and I've allowed myself to make mistakes and keep moving forward. The next thing here is a lot easier said than done, but is incredibly important, and that is spend as little time comparing yourself to others as possible. The reason I state it this way is I'm not sure as a human, at least for most humans, if it is actually possible to not compare yourself to others at all. I tend to function in a pretty healthy homeostasis when it comes to my art. I don't compare my artwork to other people's very frequently. I'm more concerned with comparing it to my own artwork, to knowing how far I've come, or in some unfortunate cases, how far I've regressed. Yet, I still cannot stop it entirely. And again, I'm not sure that anybody really truly can, unless your brain has something that is just really divergent from what the normal human brain is. So try to spend as little time comparing yourself to others as possible. This will simply allow you to stop wasting time, because in almost all aspects of art, comparing yourself to someone else, unless it is invigorating you and inspiring you and shoving you into hours and hours of work that you are enjoying, is a fruitless endeavor. And it's very, very difficult these days, because you are watching me work on art right now. You are seeing other channels on this platform that are working on art. You are probably looking on Instagram. If you're in school, you're probably seeing the people at the table next to you work on things. It is almost impossible to not compare yourself to other artists and compare your work to theirs when you see their work. And if you are an artist, and if you exist on the internet in any capacity in 2025 or beyond, you are seeing other artists' work. It is almost inevitable now. And with the rise of AI art, for some people, it's even more treacherous. I don't struggle with that at all. I don't compare myself to AI art and go like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be out of a whatever. But I know that a lot of people do. I know that AI art is very discouraging for some young artists, and probably for some that are not so young. But it's something that we're going to have to work on detaching ourselves from. It's less interesting, obviously, because it's not made by a human. There might be some interesting components to it, but I'm just not interested in it. But you have to be careful when it comes to comparing yourself to it as well. Though prominently, I think it's going to be much more often that we're comparing ourselves to other artists. So spend as little time on that as possible. If you find yourself scrolling through Instagram, excited about all these things you're seeing, and then you start to feel that kind of negative empathy, that emotion that tells you that you're comparing yourself to other people in a negative way, it's time to stop and try to walk away from that. The next thing is one of my favorites, and I actually considered switching this when I was working on the outline and putting this first, but it's create a solid and a clear plan for your artistic journey. This can honestly be one of the best things you could possibly do. By knowing what your goals are, you can create a path to get there. If you don't know what you want artistically, then there is a very small chance that you will stumble into achieving it. If your goal is simply fun, that is fine. But for most of us, as I mentioned earlier, the goal will be a little more difficult to achieve than that. So get out some paper or pull up a document on your computer or your phone and start writing. Write down every absurd and crazy thing that you want artistically. And don't judge yourself, and do not share this with anyone. Then, when you finally wind down, you finally finish with whatever this task was, set it aside. Maybe for a few minutes, maybe for a lot longer, maybe for a week or two. Maybe set an alarm or a calendar event on your phone so you can come back to this later. But when you do come back to it, take a look and start arranging each of those things in a hierarchy. What is most important to you, and how many fit within or into one another? If you want to be a comic book artist more than anything else, but you also have listed composition, anatomy, figure drawing, etc., then realize that all of those can be cached within comic book artists. They're components of that. Once you narrow things down, you can combine pieces and start prioritizing each of them. This is how a plan gets built, or at least how it starts. But it is key to remember that a plan is just that. It's a plan. It can be revised, thrown away, rebuilt, edited as you see fit, but be honest with yourself. Devise a plan, and then begin to follow through on it. In this way, you can make sure that the greatest part of your energy ends up going toward a particular and specific productive direction. And that will shave off a great deal of the difficulty that comes naturally from pursuing art. In addition, it will shave off tremendous quantities of time. Now, the caveat that I have to place here is that if you focus all of your artistic journey and you plan in order to make sure that you are being as efficient as possible, there's a very good chance that you're going to miss out on some joy, miss out on some happiness, because we as humans don't always do things well when it comes to maintaining the mean. We often gravitate toward one extreme or the other, and as Aristotle so beautifully put it, the good life is generally the mean between the two extremes, or the two excesses. So trying to find that happy space in the middle of being efficient and working towards your plans and working on things that are just fun and joy-filled, I think that's where the best artistic position is going to be found. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next kind of set of things here, bearing the burden. What about strategies to just make the bearing of this difficulty more bearable? For difficulty will, in all likelihood, still come down the pipeline. Even if you do everything in your power to reduce the pain, reduce the friction, difficulty will emerge. And if for no other reason than the fact that there are a great deal of expectations wrapped up in all of this, and that is work. And it will take a tremendous amount of time. Art is work. It doesn't maybe have to be hard all the time, but it is a skill that you are going to have to hone. Something you're going to have to pour time into, and you're probably not always going to live up to your own expectations, and that makes it difficult. So let's start here. Prepare yourself. Unfortunately, this first strategy is, at least from my perspective, just acknowledge the reality that things are going to be difficult. And sometimes just knowing that and understanding that and wrapping your head around it can be really beneficial for you. I hope this doesn't sound nihilistic or hopeless. It's not intended to be. It's just when you know that something is going to take a year to accomplish, it benefits you to not delude yourself into thinking that it might happen more quickly. If you know the artistic journey is going to take a long time, then it makes sense to wrap your head around that, to acknowledge that, and to find a way to accept it. I really want to be a tremendously better artist than I am right now. I want my YouTube channel to expand. I want to be able to make money as a full-time artist. And those are things that I'm not reaping those benefits yet. But I understand that in order to achieve those things, a tremendous amount of time has to be invested. And so rather than ignore that and become disappointed with the fact that things aren't occurring the way that I wish they were, I have acknowledged and continue to acknowledge on an almost monthly basis how much time this is going to take and what it is truly going to take. Then, when I achieve something, I feel as if it was just a dot along my path. And when I don't, generally it means I haven't put in the time yet. I haven't cracked the code on that particular thing yet. Life is a little bit crazy right now, so when things don't turn out quite the way that I want, I'm just able to sit there and go, well, yeah, but I'm packing up the house and we're getting a ton of work done on it so that we can move. And that's more of my priority in this particular moment. If I find myself in a situation where I don't have a reasonable excuse, I will probably feel really down on myself and maybe even get a little bit depressed. But I try to remain aware of the actual cost that this is going to take and prepare myself, embrace myself for what it's going to take to achieve what I want to achieve artistically. So my first piece of advice here for bearing that burden is just to prepare yourself for that, to accept the fact that it's going to take time, to accept the fact that it's going to be painful in all likelihood, that your expectations are not always going to be met, that people around you will not understand what you're trying to achieve, or even why, if they do understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. And to understand that you don't need their approval. You don't need them to get it. You don't need them to understand it. It doesn't make it less valid because other people around you don't get it. But banking off of that, I do want to talk about community. Making sure that you do have other people in your life that you can talk to and commiserate with and complain to. People that get it. People that are artists. And really, as an artist, you need, at least on some level, an artistic community. It's important to have friends that are artistic in their nature. It's obviously good to just have friends in general. Like, your life is going to be better if you have good friends and you've invested that time into them. You have people you can talk to on Discord or on the phone or in person or meet and have coffee with. But I think it's also incredibly important to have artistic friends. For a lot of us, this probably develops when we're in school. If you're taking art classes in high school or college, you've got a lot of people who are going to be with you and who obviously are going to be able to commiserate with so many of the pieces of what it is to be an artist. As you get older, it becomes a little bit more difficult. I know that some of the comments in my videos and certainly on other bigger channels' videos are a lot of this. People searching out some semblance of community. There's a lot of Discord servers. I mean, this channel has one. It's in the description down below, that have to do with this kind of stuff. I'm a member of several others that are parts of larger artistic channels. And it is nice to have the community to be able to share a piece and get feedback on it, but also just to like exist in a space with other artists who are dealing with the same loves and hates as you, who are struggling with the same things, or sometimes people who have overcome those things and can give you some advice or just tell you like, hey, keep rowing, keep paddling, keep swimming, like the island exists. You can get there. It might take a long time. It might be really, really hard, and you might not even have arms left when you get there because the sharks ate them. But that island exists. People can get there, which means you as a people can get there. Community is super, super important. If you don't have any artistic community right now, I am sorry. That is difficult. Like I mentioned, we do have a small Discord server attached to this channel that is an artistic community where you can chat with other people and talk with them and get feedback on things. But I think the biggest benefit of it is just existing in a space with other artists. If you have a local community you can become a part of, if you're still in school in some way, please connect with other people, with other humans, forge those relationships and build them. It will make the journey less painful, and it'll make it much easier to bear that burden. This next one's a little bit interesting, and it's finding pride or satisfaction in the toil. This is kind of strange perhaps, but sometimes it's possible to look at how long something will take or how crappy a situation is and just smile defiantly in the face of the doom that you cannot evade. I am strong, you tell yourself. I am resilient and I will endure. There is a pride that comes from sticking to something for a tremendously long amount of time. When you see other craftspeople who have learned what you have learned, there's almost this special glance that you can meet their eyes with when you see them, because you understand at a fundamental level, like, I have endured what you have endured. There's a camaraderie there in that. But also, as much as it sounds very pessimistic to like find pride or satisfaction in the toil, the reality is like life has a lot of stuff like this. Doing the dishes is toil. Doing your laundry is toil. Cleaning the house is toil. For some people, not me, but for some people, making food is a toil. There's a lot of things that we have to do in life that are just not fun, then you have to do them anyway. I've got a 6-year-old daughter right now, and you know, sometimes when we're talking about the stuff that she has to do around the house, she's like, I don't want to clean up my toys. I don't want to brush my hair or whatever. And it's hard to tell a 6-year-old, like, yeah, I get it, but like, I don't want to wash dishes. I know you see me do the dishes a lot. Maybe you assume that I enjoy them, but I don't. I don't like doing them. But I also don't like gross dishes just piling up in the sink. It's hard to understand when you're young, but the thing is that piece of it doesn't go away as we get older. If art is a part of your life, it's a part of your journey, there are going to be difficult patches in that. And you can kind of sit there and prepare yourself for it. You can find a way to enjoy it, like the burn in a workout, but you can also try to figure out just how to make it more enjoyable in the moment. If you have to sit there and endure 10,000 sketches of a particular thing, find a way to make them humorous. Find a way to make it interesting or satisfying to you in some way. Like, I hate working out. I wish I liked it. I run, we have an elliptical in our basement, and I run on the elliptical almost every day. And part of the reason that I'm able to do this and make sure I do it for 30 to 40 minutes each day is I grabbed an old TV that my wife and I got maybe like 15, 16 years ago, and I put it on top of an old desk, and I moved it into the workout room, and I hooked my Nintendo Switch up to it. And I will run on the elliptical, and I will play video games while I'm running. And basically what this does is, because I'm involved mentally in whatever it is I'm playing, I don't pay attention to the fact that my body hurts. So I've made this toilsome thing that is not enjoyable, that I don't like doing. I've made it more interesting and more tolerable. I got the idea from my father, actually, who has a treadmill in his basement, and he plays the God of War games while he is on the treadmill, and he'll do it sometimes for like 2-3 hours. Treadmills are a little bit easier than ellipticals generally, but yeah, it's just an example of taking something that you have to do in life and making it a little bit less burdensome. Whatever you can do artistically to do that, it's going to be a good thing. And for me, a lot of times it just means that I draw things that I enjoy. Sometimes it's dragons and monsters, but a lot of times it's robots. And I find that the designs are often something I'm enamored with, something that I enjoy putting down. And then once I've kind of gotten into it and started, I'll often employ some different skills and harness some things that I'm working on or learning, and I will still continue to progress, but I almost have to give myself the bait to get into it, to make it worthwhile in that moment for myself. So yeah, it's kind of like, tricking a dog or a cat into doing what you want them to do. But you know what? Like, I'm not above tricking myself into doing things if it benefits me in the long run. Wouldn't do it to other people. That's called gaslighting. Don't do that. It's not very kind. But tricking yourself into things that benefit you is maybe a little bit better. I don't know. If you think it's bad, let me know in the comments below. Now, obviously, this is just a small list. There are a tremendous amount of things I could talk about when it comes to this topic, and maybe I'll do another episode on this. If you've got any things that I miss here that are beneficial to you or you'd like to hear me talk about, let me know in the comments below, and I will happily attend to that in one of the future podcasts. But what about my thoughts, my personal thoughts on this? I know pieces of that kind of leak out through the episode, but I think it's beneficial too to just give you not the teacher or old artist's perspective, but my personal perspective on these things too. So if you have a need to create, not just a desire to make things for your own joy and happiness, I'm not sure that the pain of art is escapable. In fact, one of my old classroom rules was no growth occurs without pain, and I truly believe that. For me, in my personal life, the fact that I'm not where I want to be artistically is painful. The fact that I can look back on my 11 years of teaching in the public schools and realize that I thought I was enhancing my artistic skills by teaching it all the time, but I really wasn't, that's painful. That memory is regrettable, and it's a painful memory. The fact that a lot of the art that I'm working on right now, I struggle to work on when I'm not in a good emotional homeostasis. If I'm having a really hard time, if things outside of my normal life are stressing me out, it's much harder to work on my artwork. I don't like that. I wish that I was better than that. I wish I had a good coping mechanism to help me through those mechanisms. Those pieces of my art journey and art in general are kind of painful, but also just sticking to it long enough and grinding my face, against the whetstone that is art and trying to improve and learn new ways to make marks and create things. It is painful. But the thing is, it's not just pain. My art is improving, and I find immense satisfaction. The sketchbook that you're watching in the background here is probably my favorite sketchbook I've ever done. And I've done 40 or 50 or 60. I don't remember the number anymore. I have them all packed up now. But I am finding more satisfaction nowadays than ever I have before with my artwork. And so the pain is not for nothing. The pain is not for naught. It is providing me a pathway to satisfying things. And I really do try to think about it like working out or exercising. Because if you are running really, really hard, eventually you hit a point where your lungs hurt, your body hurts, your muscles hurt. And we all just kind of understand that that's necessary. That if you are starting a sport, you're going to be running back and forth on that court all day long, and it's going to hurt, and maybe you're going to be puking on the side of the court. And we're cool with that as a culture. But we seem to flinch when it comes to other things that we want to get better at being hard and painful. It doesn't make sense to me that art would be less painful. It's just psychologically painful. Your hand's probably not cramping up, but inside, emotionally and psychologically, it is very painful, maybe just as painful to learn how to make art as it is to pursue a sport. And we just don't seem to have a good way of wrapping our heads around that. I think that it's just part of the process, but I also don't think it's weird because I see it in so many other places in life. And It was hard though. It was hard when I was teaching to talk to kids and sometimes to talk to their parents about the fact that that pain is kind of natural. But, in the United States, it's usually easy to catch things in terms of sports because this culture is terribly obsessed with sports. And so when you focus on that, it seems to make a little bit more sense. So those are kind of my thoughts, that if you are the kind of person who needs to be creative, who feels like drawn to it, that you're not satisfied with life if you're not creating things and building out of your imagination, I don't think you're getting through this without some pain. But also, just know that the pain leads to results, and that if you can find a way to tolerate it, you're just going to keep improving. And if you flinch away from the pain and it discourages you, then you probably won't improve as much. And I'm sorry. I wish there was an easier way. And I know there are probably going to be some people who disagree with me. Totally fine. Like, this is a very nuanced thing, but this is my perspective from teaching and also from my personal life. Unless you are one of those beautiful, wonderful souls who is able to make art just because you want to, just for your own joy and satisfaction, I know you exist, but goodness, you are rare. Well, as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate the comments. And I hope that this is helpful. Thank you to my patrons as well, who are on the screen right now. If you want to check out the Patreon or the Discord server, they are both linked below. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.